Hi, my name is Chip Copper. I'm a strategic technologist with Brocade Communications.
And I'm Dennis Bray, the Chief Architect for Enterprise Networking Solutions.
Dennis, we just got out of a session where we were talking about how the Department of Natural Resources decided that rather than go with the flow, it seems to be a practice today that almost anyone who's looking at making their infrastructure more efficient is taking their applications and they're farming them out someplace to some cloud-based agency. But I think that what happened is your agency found that they didn't have to do that the technologies that are available that are able to allow cloud providers to provision, manage, make things secure are actually available to them as well, so that they could take those same best practices that have been proven by the cloud service providers and bring them inside the agency. What did they do?
So for the resource agency, basically they wanted to become a service provider for all of the departments within the agency. It's the current project that we were talking about in that session is basically the third iteration of a virtualized data center for Department of Water Resources internally, and then eventually for the entire agency. And they basically decided, rather than try to use Amazon or use somebody else, they could do it internally. We could actually build what we needed in-house. They had enough talent, enough experience with virtualization. The biggest thing we needed to do was take advantage of the current products from VMware, Brocade, and the like to be able to pull it all together and really deliver it through a self-service portal and have it automated so it was repeatable and predictable.
One of the things that I think that people expect with networking, you might be wondering, in this environment, what is Brocade doing here? Why are we talking about a software-defined data center? I think that most people in the enterprise today just expect for networking to be hard. They assume, for example, if they want a network to be provisioned or re-provisioned or to be allocated, that they have to fill out a help desk ticket, that the network infrastructure people have to get this ticket, that they have to provision it, that they have to wait and make things a stable, secure environment, and then turn it back over, which is a process that can take, in many cases, am I exaggerating when I'm saying weeks?
Yeah.
And that's unacceptable for your customer.
And so that's exactly what was going on for Department of Water Resources. We had done the first virtual data center, and we managed to do a lot of server consolidation. We managed to be able to standardize on templates for the virtual machines. We managed to be able to capture a lot of the configuration for the machines themselves. But inevitably, when it came time to turn those over to the business, we had to wait, literally what you described there. Service tickets went in for the networking to be configured, service tickets went in for the firewalls, and it could take, sometimes 3, 4, 6 weeks to get an application actually provisioned, even though the virtual machines themselves were ready within half an hour or a day.
I think a perfect example of that is we were talking earlier about what happened when the boxes actually arrived, when the network infrastructure came in. Now, think about how long it takes you, on the average, to take a network out of the boxes, cable it up, power it up, put it all together, and have it made available so the applications can be hosted on it. I mean, that itself can be a long project. In fact, I can remember spending too many long nights just trying to get something debugged or something to put together. But you had kind of an interesting story about what happened when the VCS fabric was brought in and taken out of the boxes and put together to be made available for the applications people. What happened?
So the current project is relying heavily on NSX for the network virtualization. So, by plan, what we needed from the underlay networks was just very, very consistent, very basic. We needed basically 4 VLANs. We needed some, just real straightforward configuration. Then everything else we were going to do on top of that. So, yeah, the Brocade SE showed up in the morning. The switches were put in the rack. He configured them. We had basically the plan was already set up. He and the water networking staff configured them. They went to lunch, came back from lunch, and we were ready to go. Right, everything we had built in the lab with NSX. Actually, we were switching out one vendor switches for another, but it was all up. The time it took from 2 or 3 hours, we were ready to go and moving right on.
So 2 or 3 hours. How much time had you provisioned originally to build out this infrastructure?
So I'm sure when it was done originally, this would have been figured out to be, we would have done, at least it would have been done in days. Figured it would take, a couple of days at least, build it up, make sure it was functional. Again, all that happened really in that short amount of time.
So a lot of people think that if you can take a network device and take it out of the box and plug it all together and have it work instantly, that it must be a toy network. You know what I mean? They must be saying there's no way, because ever since I've been in networking, we've been training people over and over again that networking needs to be hard. That in order for you to be able to take networking devices and put them together in a way to support a virtualized infrastructure especially, you have to have very complicated designs, and you have to make sure that you know exactly how things are going to be deploying, and you have to have a long-term goal for it, and you have to hire, quite frankly, very expensive people to maintain this environment, because a lot of times we look at networking individuals and we say, well, look at these certifications after my name. If networks were inherently reliable the way that they've been deployed up to this point, we wouldn't need people like that. We would just expect to be able to plug things together and have them be solid and well-behaved and predictable. So when you took this network out and it configured itself over a period of just a few hours and was ready to go in your deployment environment, how would you describe the way it behaved compared to some of the more traditional networks that you have an opportunity to work with in the past?
Well, so it was. So I'll say in this case, we had the expectation that it would be simple, it would be straightforward, it would be well behaved, it would be well planned and well implemented, and it's exactly what we got. We were again partly because of the way we knew we were gonna leverage NSX. We weren't worried about. In this example, in the environment we're talking about here, it's going to be for 35 different departments within the resource agency. When we did this with a vCloud director and traditional networking from another vendor in 2011, we had to go through and we had to plan out, what did we figure out? Like 15 VLANs for each different customer, so 35 times 15 on the VLANs. We were going to do those VLANs configured on, top of rack switches, on another intermediate set of switches back into the core switches. We had to make sure we had that configured. We're also using HP Blade chassis for that deployment, so we also had to worry about configuring the I/O modules on the back of that. So, we really had to go configure every one of those VLANs in 4 or 5 different places, and that's always been. That's really been the issue with deployment from my perspective. Has been we did it great on one set, we did it great on another set, but every time we had to go configure it again meant we had another opportunity for somebody to do something unique or for something to be missed, right? Cut and paste sounds great, particularly for traditional network guys doing it with his, he's got his SSH section and he's I got all the config from this one, I'll just copy it into the next one. But in this case, he had to remember that, well, we had different numbering for the VLANs on this side than we had different for that side, and now we turn it up and we got to go troubleshoot it. Didn't have to worry about that in this case.
That's good. So I want to amplify on something that's going on here. You mentioned earlier that there was a different networking vendor. I want to point out the fact that we're not talking here about bashing someone else. This has nothing to do with making another vendor look bad. That's not what this is about. What we're talking about here is an entirely new concept to networking people. The technology that's being used in the fabric that allows you to connect any host to any other host has actually been around now for about 15 years. We don't have to guess about whether or not a fabric is going to work, especially in the Ethernet and IP infrastructure, because for the past 15 years, we've had fabrics that have been used for storage traffic. Now, if you know storage traffic is hyper picky. It requires you to have the deterministic, low latency, highly available, in order, non-duplicated, non-corrupted delivery from the source to the destination every single time, or the infrastructure crashes. By the way, you can tell this is the first time I've ever strung together those adjectives, right? So we know that these IP infrastructures work. So we're not talking about comparing one networking vendor to the last. We're talking a generation here. We're talking about the fact that we're going to take things which up till this point have been very, very manual processes, and we're talking about taking that automation and intelligence and pushing it down into the infrastructure. It's not, I believe, unexpected for you to say in 2015, it's reasonable to assume that a device is going to be intelligent enough that if you plug a cable into it, it's going to know what to do. If I take 2 boxes, as a matter of fact, we have to train people to be afraid of networks. If you take someone who's in the 5th or 6th grade and you show them 2 networking devices and you say, make these 2 boxes talk to each other, they plug them together with the full expectation that these boxes are going to talk to each other. But networking people train people, the last generation, to say, no, 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 that's dangerous, that's risky. You have to configure these things manually. So given the fact that you're using one of these fabrics underneath, and I'm putting you on the spot here, how much of an effort would you say was it to manage this new infrastructure that's supporting your virtualized environment as opposed to what it was before from a percentage viewpoint? Can you quantify that? And I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
Remember, probably compared to the previous, we're probably not even close to 5-10% of the amount of effort that we had to do before. I mean, it's really been minimal, and it really has been just reliable and if we make any changes to the configuration, it's very straightforward.
One of the questions that we got in our session a little bit earlier was when people were discussing, one of the big things they wanted to know about was how do you monitor this? How do you know what's going on? And they wanted to make sure that, for example, with scripting, things were able to, you were able to validate very easily if something had been done wrong. That was such a telling question, because the first thing that it tells you is that they're expecting there to be problems with the script, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That they've all had such negative experiences with networks that they're just expecting that when you put together these scripts, something's going to go wrong and you're going to have to go in damage control about that. But I think one of the things that's different about these fabrics is that rather than being based on procedures, they're based on policies. So for example, you can tell the network how it is to behave rather than telling the network explicitly what it is to do to get that behavior. Now that's a huge step forward. As a matter of fact, even in migrating the virtual machines from node to node, the network is able to use policies rather than procedures to do that migration. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Well, I'd speak from the standpoint of how we were doing the automation. We really we're doing it from the same exact, going from a policy standpoint, right? We're not using a lot of scripts for the deployments. The deployments are being done using vRealize automation. The deployments are being done from blueprints. The blueprints are pretty straightforward. We've, to be sure, we've done checking on them, but we're not relying on scripts in the background to do it. When we deployed those virtual machines, and in our example in the session, we were showing that, firewall rules were ready to go. Well, the firewall rules were done based on policies. The policies were being applied to specific virtual machine groups, security groups. The security groups were based on the actual properties of the virtual machines. So it really wouldn't matter. Any virtual machine that we put in there, if the properties of the virtual machine matched the policy, then it was going to get the rules that we had already put in place. And that's from the department's point of view. This was one of the big problems with all the previous versions was, particularly with the firewall rules, we had to, those were always done bespoke. Those were always done after the virtual machines were configured because they needed to wait for the IP address. Even if we told them what the IP address was, they had some reason to wait. They had to make sure how it was all done. In this case, we really treat it like policy. These machines should be able to talk to these machines over these protocols, and when we deploy it, as the policy fits, the rules apply. So, I mean, that concept, and we're definitely not relying on scripts for any of this. We don't, we don't want scripts any more than anybody else wants the scripts.
So I think that other people looking at this and seeing is it a favorable way of doing things is a very sincere testimony to exactly what this technology can do for you. How would you describe how other departments are able to take advantage of the infrastructure that they've put together here?
So within the resource agency, for the 28 different departments, I mean, they're really the customers we've got in place for this. The customers that are in the existing, they call it DC2, the existing shared cloud environment, we've got really good information about them. That's how we determined sort of how we were going to shape the blueprints going forward. So I'm at a loss. I'm sitting thinking, what's going to happen is that we've basically built an environment that we already know about what they've expected for the last couple of years. They should be able to just come in and consume it without an awful lot of external or extra work that they have to do to be able to consume the services. I don't know if I'm answering.
Oh, absolutely does. I think the biggest takeaway from all this is the fact that up until now, people have assumed that cloud services necessarily need to come from a cloud service provider. And if somebody wants to get the type of service that you've just described here, they need to go outside. You've proven that technology is available to anyone who wants to do it. We're at VMworld, and the people here want to concentrate on virtualized environments, not on the underlying networking infrastructure. That's our job. Let us do it in a way that's easiest for you. If you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to either ask www.brocade.com, to send out hashtag AskBrocade. We look forward to see what we can be doing to answer the questions so that you can bring these cloud technologies into your environment as well. Thanks for watching.